Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 36 of the No Quit Living podcast. I am your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is forgiveness. Our quote of the day comes to us from Gerald Japolsky. I can have peace of mind only when I forgive rather than judge. Today's podcast is a very intense episode, as we will be discussing some very serious topics. Our guest has endured some unbelievably challenging and extremely tough circumstances throughout his life. I am incredibly humbled and honored to be able to share his story with you today. With that said, I would like to introduce Jeremy Wenger. Jeremy, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I appreciate you being here. So the first question is, are you ready to make it happen today?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So to begin, you have quite an impressive story about your attitude and the way you go about life. And I was curious if you wouldn't mind sharing your story with our listeners.
Well, for starters, I appreciate the kind words. And do I just start anywhere, or would you like me to start in a specific point?
That's a good question. You can start wherever you feel appropriate. What we spoke about yesterday is your story is incredible in many ways. So why don't you start where you feel is most appropriate?
Okay. Well, I is just to kind of circle back when the tragedy happened. You know, I was on the way to Iowa for a family reunion, and I was with my mom, my brother, and my sister, and we're traveling from Alabama to Iowa because we go there every year. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this will be cool, but we're all cramped in a sedan, and so you have four people, you have four kids, you know, of all ages, and and that are in this vehicle, and we ended up stopping in Illinois as a halfway point because that 12 hours cramped in a sedan is quite a feat to take on, especially with four people who once you're together for so long, you can only take so much, and so. So we ended up stopping in Champaign, Illinois, and which has nothing to do with Champaign, and it's all farms, but it's really weird. But we stopped there, and I ended up, I crashed that night. I was exhausted, and I woke up the next morning, and my grandma called me. I was like, she'll be fine. You know, we're going to go see her, no big deal. We're on our way there. We're literally like 5 hours away from where we were going for family reunion. So I was like, she'll be fine. I love her anyways. I'll see you there. And I hung it up and tried to go back to sleep. She called again. I'm like, Grandma, goodness gracious, click. Try to go back to sleep. And next thing I know, my mom screams and runs out of the room. I'm like, well, that's weird. She never does that. But, she's my mom. Stuff happens. I have no clue what's going on. It's not my business. I'm not even trying to worry about it. Try to go back to sleep, and I couldn't go back to sleep, and I'm getting ready to go downstairs for this amazing continental breakfast that we have of stale Fruit Loops and dry cold toast that they've got down there in the hotel we're staying in. and I listened to the voicemail my grandma left me, and I'm like, that's weird. She never leaves me a voicemail. Probably because sometimes she forgets, but she's such a sweetheart. And I was listening to it, and that's when I listened to the voicemail, and that's when I found out that my dad had been murdered. And immediately when we see things in the movies about how everything flashes before our eyes, that happened with me, because flashing back from that into where I am now, I flashed back in a moment's notice, and back from when my parents divorced when I was 10 to suffering abuse with my dad. That's how my mom made me go work with my dad, and so that's one of the reasons why I became addicted to multiple combinations of drugs and suffering public and private abuse, just physical and verbal, mental abuse. There was no sexual abuse at all, but it was just very oppressive. And that's where actually I got my start in business and entrepreneurship, because working with him, he after my parents' divorce, he didn't want to jeopardize our relationship, but at the same time, the employees that I was out there on the job site going to work with, on the job site, saw what was going on with my dad and me, and they really couldn't do much because of their position. And I mean, it's just there were worse things that were happening, and there were drugs at the house, cocaine, ecstasy, marijuana, alcohol, tons of alcohol. Prostitutes and escorts were, well, I mean, those are two different levels, but but prostitutes and escorts were over at the house every night. Drug dealers every other night to have drugs for the escorts. Drug dealers over the house every other night to have drugs for the escorts, and buying guns. My dad had an arsenal in his room, everything from AK-47 down to 9mm, including AR-15s and stuff. And so it was a lifestyle that he lived that I was I was just intrigued by. And so even though my mom made me go live with my dad because of the bad behavior and stuff, because behind the scenes my dad was actually lying to me about my mom, and so that's what really caused me to act out and became addicted, because I was like, man, this is a really fast lifestyle, this is nuts, but also it scares me, but that's what I loved about it. And so over 4 years, being expelled every year from 7th to 10th grade, it was really really impacted me that my principal there in middle school was actually served as a father figure, and he looked out for me a lot. And so fast forward through all of that, at 16 years old, I was going to take my life, and then that's when I received God in my heart. And when Jesus stepped in, things just started to shift. And over the next 2 years leading up to that week when I got the phone call, the relationship was being restored. And I mean, by putting in boundaries with my dad, I remember getting out of rehab after a 7-week stint in Mobile, Alabama, that I went on the job site immediately because I needed to go back to work and get focused and just develop those good habits. And I go back on the job site. My dad asked me to do the stupidest thing in the world. I'm like, are you serious? No. And the employees are standing like literally 30 feet away, and they're like, because I mean, it was along the lines of something that was not productive, that was ridiculously overcomplicated, and was not efficient. And it was just absolutely petty too. And he asked me to do that one thing. I told him, I said no. And he lunged at me like he was about to punch me, like full on 45-degree leaning punch. I just leaned in and said, what? He never did it again. And so a series of events like that were happening over those 2 years. And I mean, where I would, I'd be talking with people on the job site. He would be hiring employees who were drug addicts that were, it was just a thing. And so it led up to one point where I told him, I said, Dad, I can't work with you anymore if you're going to allow drug use on the job site, especially when they're taking down a 30-foot tall pine tree and smoking marijuana. I said, Dad, you can't really do that. It's not really safe. And he's like, well, son, it comes with the territory. And I said, okay, I quit, because I'm not about to jeopardize my life. And so there were things like that where I had to love him at a distance over those 2 years and put in boundaries. But I went to see him on a Thursday night, and my gut just told me to go see him. I just had peace in my heart. And, it just God put it on my heart to go see him. It made no sense at all. And that's when the following Sunday is when I went up to Iowa and I got the phone call. And they ended up life flighting my dad's body from Alabama to Iowa. My dad canceled his life insurance policy after my parents divorced out of spite. And, my parents had to pay for that out of pocket. Life flighting everything up, and the vacation turned into a funeral. And working through that, fast forward 6.5 years to September of 2016, they actually found the man accused for putting a bullet in my dad's brain pan last September. And a lot of times I reflect back onto it. But when I got the phone call, it clicked inside of me when the investigators told me they found someone. And they really just let me know that they had found someone. They didn't want to go into detail, that I needed to be there in person. So I made a trip to Alabama. But it clicked inside of me. I said, finally, I could use my experience to pour into people, because I've been waiting 6.5 years to tell this man one thing. We've already had the preliminary hearing, but I haven't been able to tell him this just yet. But on my journey to tell him, to look him deep in his eyes and say, look, man, I forgive you, that Jesus loves you. And all I care about is you having a brand new beginning, because that's what I had. And on that journey to meet him face to face, I've just had the opportunity and the privilege to pour back into people. I happen to have an online community now, and we actually just had our first Stories of Hope series last night. Actually, we do them every Thursday, and where people who are entrepreneurs, who have businesses and who have lost loved ones, share their stories and how they've been able to function and they've been able to thrive in their businesses after losing someone. And so that way they don't just hear it from me, because since last September, it's an honor to have someone be able to trust you with such a deep, intimate part of their heart. And it's been an absolute journey to be able to talk people off the ledge of suicide, help train them on how to know how to navigate a conversation when someone else wants to commit suicide. Either those who are talking about it who are actually going to do it, but also how to indicate those signals and stuff too. And then also with PTSD, depression, shame, survivor's guilt, regret. The list goes on, because we all experience different things when we go through this. And so it's been an absolute journey, and such a refreshing thing to be able to just to pour back into people. And when you hear that hope in their voice, and you can see that light come back in their eyes, that hope, you can't put a price tag on that. And so it's been amazing to be able to pour back from my experience, and then inspire others to do the same. Because if I can just impact one person, man, this is all worth it. Like, if I can genuinely change a person's life, not people who talk about it, not emotional on roller coasters or anything, but I mean, genuinely help someone be healed, that is where all of this is worth it. Just one person.
That's an incredible story, and I truly appreciate you sharing that. And it's unbelievable in the sense of what you had to go through along the way. But what you just said at the end, it really hit me. And it's all about making an impact, and it's all about taking that horrific situation. And I can't tell you, I'm not even going to try to tell you I know what you're going through, nor do I know what you have gone through, but I can tell you it speaks about your character and the way you're making an impact now. And I just have to say that it's an unbelievable story, and I truly appreciate you sharing that with us. If you wouldn't mind, 30 seconds or less, if you could, tell us a little bit about the new program you're doing, and maybe some of our listeners would be interested in finding out a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, man. A lot of times I can't truly relate to what other people are going through, but I can understand. And that's where the power comes into play. And that's where we're actually being able to help other people who can't relate also be there as a support for others as well. And so we actually have right now, only on Facebook for right now, because it's so just organic. It's just stronger in community on Facebook. People can go there. They can join the group. We have the page right now, and we're going to be putting things together in the future for if people want to book for speaking engagements and stuff, to come in and just to pour into other people, that we can definitely do that. But as of right now, just people can go on Facebook and just search Stronger in Community and answer the couple of questions that we have, so that way we know you're not a robot, and that way we can come in and help cater to your needs.
That will be in the show notes as well, and I highly recommend that our listeners take a look. I've gone there and looked myself, and again, not to go back, but it's just amazing what you're doing. And I think in life, we all don't know what other people are going through. And the objective of our podcast is to motivate and inspire others to never give up on themselves or their dreams. And I think directly and indirectly what you're doing is you're taking that to an entirely different level in a good way, where I'm talking about dreams and goals, and you're talking about saving people's lives and things like that. So I truly commend you for some of that work. To take a different spin on this, many of our listeners are into personal development or looking to improve different areas of their lives. And I was curious in your journey if you've read something that's motivated you or inspired you, or if you'd like to share or recommend a book to our listeners.
Yeah, the one book, when I was in rehab, what started this entire process, because a lot of people ask, how was I ever able to, how was I ever able to forgive my dad for one, let alone forgive the person who murdered him? It all started back when I had to work on myself and to work on my own heart. And The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren is the one book that my mom sent me when I was in rehab. And that's what caused the pinnacle shift into where it actually put me in the place where I am now. If it wasn't for that book, I would not have known what to do, period. And that book it's a day-to-day devotional, and it is a Christian faith-based book. However, it is such a powerful book in general that anybody needs to read it. Anybody and everybody needs to read that book, because it will help everyone understand how to forgive and how to overcome that. My life's living proof.
No, your life definitely is living proof, and again, I can't commend you enough, but the idea and the concept of forgiveness is something that I think in today's day and age, with all the negativity out there, we can all take a page out of your book, and I'm sure to each and every one of our listeners, there's somebody or something that we can forgive. And one thing we talk about is the positive spin with No Quit Living and our No Quit Living listeners and fans, and I think that's something that we can all take from today's episode with you, is if you were able to forgive not only your father, but the gentleman that murdered your father, I got to look back at my life and say, who are the people that I should forgive? And it doesn't mean that you need to become best friends with that person, whether you've been...
not at all.
No, and I think it's important to note, though, is if you got a sour business deal or an ex-spouse or ex-girlfriend or boyfriend. But my point is that if you can forgive in your situation, you individually, but also the other person, is I think it just puts a different spin and puts a positive spin on moving forward. And again, doesn't mean you have to be friends with that person, doesn't mean you need to communicate with that person, but I think it just puts you in a different mindset where you say, you know what, I forgive you. It doesn't mean I might not like you, might not want to deal with you in a business or relationship, but I forgive you, and I'm moving on and you're moving on. So I can't take enough from your story. And again, it goes back to my life and making me think right now in the back of my mind is, who are those people or things that I should forgive?
Well, one of the things that, for when it comes down to forgiveness, is a lot of it resorts back to understanding. We love, it's the golden rule: treat people as you want to be treated. However, let's take that a little bit deeper. We treat others how we treat ourselves, and that's not a philosophical point, but that is a general human makeup. It's like a law of gravity, that if you enjoy yourself, you will always help others enjoy themselves too, because it is a byproduct of what you have. You cannot give someone what you don't have, period. You can't pour out of an empty cup. And that's where, when I had to go through and understand that I was first loved, because like going back to, I'm a Christian, so when I understood more about what Jesus did at the cross, and that my value wasn't based on what I did or lack thereof, that's when I understood. I made the shift from doing to being, and then my doing came as a result. My actions came as a reflection of what I believed about myself. And when we can truly shift that and understand that we are valuable, that we still have a purpose, because that's one of the biggest things is, it's like I kind of see me like an archaeologist when helping people rediscover their passion in the midst of their pain. And that right there, there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about hope deferred, when it's prolonged, makes the heart sick, but when it's fulfilled, it's like a tree of life. And it's like we have that thing that's inside of us that it's stagnated, but it's for whatever reason, when we're wrapped into the pain, it's that glimmer of hope, that little spark that people need. But by understanding that there's more, that they can do it.
It's a great concept. And speaking of quotes, we use a daily quote in our podcast. I was curious if you have a favorite quote.
Man, there's so many. Well, I guess I can leave them with a quote of my own, I guess, and just encourage them, engage in every moment with those around you before you can.
Engage in every moment with those around you before you can. Is that what you said?
Yes.
That is quite a powerful quote. We all know life is incredibly challenging, and obviously you've dealt with yours. In today, 2017, what motivates you and inspires you each and every day to keep on going?
The person in front of me.
That's the quickest response we've had to that question. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Hmm.
You can't say me.
Oh man, no, that's already a given. We already taken care of that. But man, I would love to sit with Warren Buffett, or John Maxwell, one of those two guys, because their wisdom and their experience.
That would be quite a dinner if we could set up both John Maxwell and Warren Buffett. I think you'd need a couple of notebooks or recording devices because
No, yeah, I need like 4 different recording devices with 5 USBs hooked into it.
just to make sure you can get all of it. So you mentioned the project that you're working on now, and I know you mentioned your Facebook page. For those listeners that want to connect with you, are you visible on other social media outlets, or is it just Facebook the easiest way to connect with you?
Well, technically, anyone can Google my first and last name, and all of my social media stuff pops up number one. So they can reach out to me whichever form, on whatever platform works best for them. So they can just go to Google and type in Jeremy Wenger, and that way, whatever platform they use, it'll pop up. LinkedIn's number one. Then it comes up YouTube, then Facebook, and Instagram and Twitter and stuff. So they can always reach out to me. But I'm always on Facebook, but I'm always on Instagram too. So they can always reach out to me on those.
No, and I would highly recommend our listeners following you on your social media outlets, but also connecting with you on your Facebook page, because that sounds incredible what you are doing and the positive impact you are having on so many others. So before we let you go, I just wanted to ask if you had any parting words for our listeners.
For you that's listening right now, if you take nothing from what I've shared, understand that forgiveness is a process at times. Repairing those relationships are key, but never jeopardize yourself for the sake of someone else. However, at the same time, engage to the degree that you can with that person, because in the end, it will be worth it. It will be absolutely worth it, and words will not be able to describe the satisfaction that you have by overcoming how uncomfortable it will have been.
Those some powerful words. And Jeremy, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your journey and your story with us today. I got to say, it's impactful. It stands out. And you're one of the most favorite guests I've had, not from your story, but just the way you have transitioned into giving back. And again, not that I could ever say I understand what you're going through or I've experienced it, but I can tell you that your concept of forgiveness and it being a journey and having to do it, and not only forgiving your father, but the gentleman who murdered your father. It's just an unbelievable story about forgiveness. So I wanted to, again, thank you for sharing that with us. And more importantly, I wanted to just say thank you for what you're doing. I think what you're doing and the way you're giving back and the way you're taking your story and turning it into a positive, I think is just amazing. And I think a lot of people take situations and they turn it into the woe is me. And I think you've obviously done a 180 with that. So I just wanted to, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. But more importantly, thank you for what you're doing moving forward.
I mean, I appreciate the opportunity and the trust that you've given to me to speak to your audience that you protect so dearly. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. I look forward to talking with you soon. To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, forgiveness, it would be impossible not to be affected by Jeremy's story. Emotional and physical abuse, drugs, rehab, divorce, contemplating suicide, murder, and forgiveness. Jeremy has endured more than his fair share of life's challenges, but throughout it all, he never gave up. Instead, Jeremy was somehow able to find forgiveness in his heart and give back. How he was able to do that is beyond me, but it speaks about the type of man he is and the faith he has inside of him. When presented with the choice of being bitter or being better, Jeremy chose better. And today he is giving back to those in need and helping in his very unique and giving way. While most people think about what's in it for them, Jeremy is giving back and thinking of others first and foremost. So today's call to action for our listeners is very simple. Forgive. We all have somebody or somebodies in our life that we should forgive today. So my very specific call to action is to forgive. Pick up the phone, go see them in person, but forgive. Follow Jeremy's examples and both forgive and give, and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.